Hello, you are welcome once again to my channel. This class is for the basic 8, those in DHS2 now or basic 8. And we are going to look at what? At the carbon cycle. We are going to look at the carbon cycle. All basic 8 students, call your friends, to call your friends, to call all friends of basic 8 to get ready because we are going to have a very interesting class today. Now, this is what we are saying here. All the notes to the explanations here are on the website, which is www.mactclass.com. Once you get there, if you're using your phone, there is a menu box there, 3 lines. Click on that, you have your DHS, go to DHS2, then science, then the note will be ready for you to download. Once you download the notes, you come back to the video, then you follow the explanations to the informations in the note. We'll also be giving you some simplified notes on the board. Be writing them, get yourself involved. What we are going to do here today. And thank you once again for joining. We are very, very grateful. So let's go straight into our carbon cycle. Now, when we say carbon cycle, we talk of carbon cycle. A cycle in the first place is what we should understand. And why carbon? And what is carbon doing in that cycle? I like the question. Why carbon? And what is it doing? Now, carbon is one of the most abundant elements found in our universe. In all living things, we have carbon in us. Every living thing has the element carbon. Carbon is an element that is found in the universe. An element with atomic number 6 is carbon, symbol that. Now, as I was saying, when we say carbon cycle, we are looking at how carbon moves from one point to the other, to another, and back again to where it started. So once you have that, then we say you have what? A cycle. In fact, we have so many cycles. We have the water cycle or the hydrological cycle. We have the nitrogen cycle, and also the carbon the carbon cycle. Good. Even the circulatory system, even in the circulatory system, also it's a cycle. Because blood moves from your heart, goes around the body, and comes back to the heart again. In that order, we have a cycle. And in any cycle, there are stages involved. We're going to look at that in this form, or in this class. Now, those who have downloaded the note, if you don't have it, you pause, you go and get the note, then you come well prepared, breaking down with nice pictures so that you can follow. Let's go straight into it without wasting much time. Now, we are saying that all living things are made up of what? Of carbon. All living things have carbon in them. It forms the chemical backbone of life. Now, our life we are living is based mostly on what? On carbon compounds. So if this is life, what is holding us is what? Is the carbon. It's carbon that is holding us. So it forms our backbone. That is what carbon does. That means in most of the things we take into our system, or most of the things we deal with here, both living and non-living, they contain what? They contain carbon. Now, in the air we breathe, like I said, in the air we breathe, so carbon exists in the air as well as carbon dioxide. Remember that the carbon is in everything that we have here. Everything we have here, there's carbon there. That's why it forms the backbone of our life. So this carbon here is forming the backbone of what? Of life. And we are saying that in the air we breathe, the carbon is present as well as CO2, which is carbon dioxide. The air that we breathe in. The moment we breathe in, we give out what? We breathe in oxygen, we give out what? Carbon dioxide. So it's in the air. Now, also in the oceans and the water. So in water, carbon is present as well as bicarbonate. HCO3 minus, hydrogen carbonate. This is the form, the state in which you can find carbon in what? In water. And once again, when you come to rocks, it's like the limestone, the carbon exists in it as well as the limestone. Then in the ground, so rocks, limestone, then in the ground, as in earth, that is where it exists as well as fossil fuels, which is petrol, which is coal, natural gas. So in this we have natural gas. As one of the forms in which carbon exists as well as coal, and also as well as petrol. also as well as petroleum. So these are the forms in which carbon exists. Once again, that's our backbone. The life we are living, most of the things we take in depend on what or contain what carbon. That is why we are saying the backbone. And this is the what the proof that in the water, the air, the rocks, the ground, even the food we take, sugar, all the food substances that we take have carbon in them. When we get to food and nutrition, we shall talk of those things. Yeah. Now, the movement of carbon from one area to another forms the basis of what? A carbon cycle. The movement from carbon, the movement of carbon from the air to water, to the rocks, to the ground, and back again to the earth form the basis of what? Of the carbon cycle. So in this case, carbon moves from the air into water, from the water, it goes to maybe the rocks, then goes to the ground, then carbon once again comes back again into the air. Then that we say we have what? And this continues. It will be a cycle of carbon. And that is what we refer to as well as the carbon cycle. Good. So when you hear the carbon cycle, it means we are circulating what? Carbon in the air, in water, in rocks, in ground, in living things, non-living things. Everything here contains what? Carbon. Once again, backbone of what? Of life. Good. So now let's define our carbon cycle. Let's define carbon cycle straight here in the note. Carbon cycle shows how carbon moves from the atmosphere through living and dead organisms into the soil and back into the world, into the atmosphere. Once again, let's go. As a carbon cycle, it shows or tells me and you how carbon moves from the atmosphere. From the atmosphere, it goes through living and what? And dead organism into the soil, then back into what? Into the atmosphere again. So carbon cycle from the definition. So carbon cycle shows how carbon does what? Carbon moves through the following. So carbon moves from the air or atmosphere. Carbon moves from the air into living and dead organisms, into living and dead organisms, into the soil. So it shows how carbon cycle shows how carbon moves from air into dead and living organism, then the soil, then it goes back into the what? Into the air. So that becomes the cycle. So we have from here, it goes into this, from there to this, then back into what? Into the air. So it forms what? A cycle. And therefore there are stages involved in what? In the carbon cycle. Take note. When it comes to the carbon cycle, carbon exists. You can ask that question. That in the air, carbon exists as well as carbon dioxide, that is in water, that's in rocks. Then we have what? As well in the ground, that's where we get the fossil fuel. And we'll look at that shortly. And let's look at the steps involved in the carbon cycle. What are the steps involved? What happens in the carbon cycle? Now, in the carbon cycle, we are saying, if you look at the definition, it shows how carbon moves from where? It shows how carbon moves from air. So in the air, how does carbon move from the air into living and dead organism? Listen to this. How will carbon move from the air into living things and also into dead things? Now, carbon will move from the air into living things through the plants. So plants are the guys that will remove the carbon dioxide from the what? From the atmosphere. So we are saying that carbon cycle shows how carbon moves from air. And I'm saying that for carbon to move from air, we need what? We need plants to do this job. Plants are going to move the carbon or remove carbon from what? From the air. And we say carbon in the air is in the form of what? In the form of CO2. So plants use their process or a process they call photosynthesis, which forms the what? The first stage of the carbon cycle is what is photosynthesis, where plants are able to absorb the what? The carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, and also in the presence of sunlight, they're able to manufacture their own food. When they do that, the carbon has now moved from the atmosphere into a living thing, plants a living thing. The animals will come and feed on the plants as food. The moment you feed on the plants, you now get the carbon into your system as a living thing. Hear the point I'm making here. Good. So we are saying that In the carbon cycle, carbon is moving from where? From air. From the air, plants will absorb the carbon in the form of carbon dioxide. By a process called photosynthesis, they are able to make what? To make food. And when they make this food, animals will now come. They are happy, ready to eat. Once they feed on this, the carbon now enters into what? Into them. So if you look at the second point, it says plants are then consumed. Animals will now consume the plant, and carbon gets accumulated in their bodies. So once I eat any carbon food, any food that contains carbon, and most of the food substances or nutrients contain what? Carbon. I get a carbon into what? Into my system. Now, animals and plants will now respond to release the carbon into the atmosphere. Of course, one of the life processes is what? It's respiration. And in respiration, we take in oxygen and give out once again what? Carbon dioxide. So we are saying that once we have this, plants manufacture their food, then manufacture their food, the animals will feed on the food. Then they get what? They get their energy. Now, once again, these plants and animals, let me use the red. Once again, these plants and animals, they respire. When we say respire, they undergo respiration. Now, their respiration release CO2. So gives CO2 out. So gives out what? CO2. Gives out CO2. When they respire, when they breathe in and breathe out, during the process, they do what? They give out the CO2. You look at the circulation, we look at it, we are saying that the carbon goes from the atmosphere. How would the carbon get out of the atmosphere into living things? The plants are the first guys to do that. What they do, they absorb the CO2, the presence of sunlight, chlorophyll, they manufacture their food through photosynthesis. Then the animals or human beings will now feed on the food that is produced. Don't make you feed on the food. The second point is saying that the plants are consumed by animals, and carbon gets accumulated in our bodies. Accumulated in our bodies. Then we, the animals and the plants, also respond to release the carbon into the atmosphere, and we also die, decompose, releasing what? The carbon. So with the carbon is circulating, it enters you give it out, and you also die. So in the process of giving it out, we either respire or what? We die. So when we respire, we give it out. When we die, we also give out the carbon. I don't know if you get the point I'm making here. Good. So let me go over that again. I'm saying that plants and animals, or plants will get the carbon dioxide. They prepare food through what? Through photosynthesis. Animals will feed on the food, then the carbon gets accumulated in their body. When animals and plants respire, and plants respire, what happens? We give out carbon dioxide. We give out carbon dioxide to the atmosphere again. Not only respire, but again, when we die, when animals and plants die, so when animals and plants die, once again, they give out what? They give out CO2, or they release CO2 into the soil. Remember that there's soil here. Because when we die, we are buried what? In the soil. I don't know if you understand what I'm saying here. So it started from here, the plants moved them, we got it. Then we also, after getting it, we gave it out again into the soil. Then from the soil, it goes back into what? Into that. Those in the water bodies and the other ones will also evaporate. And they also get into what? The atmosphere. So you see the cycle and you understand. So this is how carbon circulates in our world. Now, at the same carbon, you use it to bring it out, and that happens. So the carbon that goes into the atmosphere, the plant will trap it again, use it again. If you don't take it, then we continue the cycle. Because that is basically what a cycle is. Good, let's go again. Let's go to the last point. The unreleased carbon forms fossil fuel used for human activities to release more carbon into the atmosphere. So we release more. Now, if you look at what is happening critically, I've mentioned 4 things here. That we have the process where we remove the carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. As I mean the carbon dioxide, we respire to give it out, we die to give it out. We also burn. After those that are left in our body when we die, they become what? They become fossil fuels. And once they become the fossil fuel, we can now tap that fossil fuel and use them for human activity, for petrol, for diesel, for coal. Once we begin to burn them, the moving cars that burn petrol are all releasing to the atmosphere carbon dioxide. And that carbon dioxide, once again, plants absorb them, so the cycle does up. the cycle continues. Good. So that's basically what the carbon cycle is about. Now let's look at the diagram there. Now turn to the diagram. You can see there. The diagram is about the carbon cycle. Let's go into it. Now you can see that at the top there, we have what? We have CO2 at the top there. Then study the arrows very carefully. The arrows are very important. You can see that the arrow that comes to the plant means that the plant is able to absorb the what? The carbon dioxide. And there's an arrow showing to a photosynthesis. So by the process, they make food. When they make food, the food is what we call organic compound, organic food. We eat organic foods. That organic compound, the animals or water will feed on it. When we feed on it, we are not able to absorb it. So we release it into the atmosphere. And you can see it either through respiration or when we die. So either through respiration, we can release it, it's a black one. Either through respiration, I'm looking at the cycle now. Let's take the cycle. Either through respiration or through death. So this and this, we human beings or plants and animals release what? The carbon dioxide into the what? Into the atmosphere. Let's go again. The carbon cycle, blue in color, you can see CO2 there. And let's look at the arrow. I said first of all the arrow to the plant. So you can see there, So we have the arrow to the what? To the plant. This plant uses photosynthesis to absorb what? To absorb the carbon dioxide. Prepares its own food, organic carbon here. Then the plants or the animals will feed on. When animals feed on them, they have nothing to do than to release them back. It's not yours. You took it from somebody. Give it out. So they give it out either by what? By respiring, or when they do what? When they die, they do that and they become waste materials there. We said the unreleased ones, come back to the steps, the last one. The unreleased carbon forms fossil fuels used for human activity. So you can see the arrow from the ship going down. Dead organism and waste product. Down it, they form what? They form fossil fuel. So the arrow comes from there. Then these fossil fuel are used in factories. Factories will burn this fuel for them to run their activities. Cars will burn them. So these factories, once they burn them, they also release into the atmosphere. What again? The carbon again. So the thing is that carbon is in the atmosphere. Once we take it, we are in a cycle. We have to give it out. So we take it by photosynthesis. Then after photosynthesis, then we release them by respiration, by combustion, and when I say combustion, I mean burning. Then by what? By respiration. So respiration, combustion, and decomposition. Good. These are the three processes by which we give out CO2. So that means that in the carbon cycle, I look at the stage. There are 4 stages. We have photosynthesis, we have respiration, we have decomposition, and burning. If you look at these things, the first one is the guy that absorbs. The rest are those that will give out. So they release into the atmosphere carbon dioxide. People, let's go. Good. So back again. I don't know if you have understood the diagram. So let me go over the diagram once again. But that's the most important thing. You also understand the cycle. In a practical question, they can draw it for you. Study the arrows. If an arrow is moving from a plant up there, that means that is plant respiration. The plant is respiring. That means it's giving back to the atmosphere. It shows how carbon moves from the air or the atmosphere. In fact, carbon gets into the atmosphere. Are we getting what I'm saying here? You sure? Then let's move on. So that is it. You can see that from there we absorb the carbon dioxide by photosynthesis is there. Then the food prepared by the plants was fed on by what? The animal. The animal can do nothing than to give it out. It gives it out in 2 ways. Animals will release the carbon in 2 ways, either by respiring to give it out, or they die. What have they done? They just ate, so they die. Once they die, they return the carbon back into the soil. And those that are not released become fossil fuels. Once they become fossil fuel, then these factories, cars will also go and get these fossil fuels and burn them in their engines and other things, and that also release carbon into the atmosphere. So basically, that is this carbon cycle. That's what carbon cycle is all. It's about. Good. Parts of the carbon cycle. Let's go. Parts of the carbon cycle. The carbon cycle, we have 2. We have the terrestrial carbon cycle, and we have what? The aquatic carbon cycle, or the terrestrial habitat and the aquatic habitat. So look at the types of carbon cycle. If we say terrestrial, what we mean is that the carbon cycle that occurs on land. And when we say aquatic, it means carbon cycle that occurs on or in water. So let's look at the parts of the carbon cycle. Parts. parts of the carbon cycle. Part of the carbon cycle. We have two parts of the carbon cycle. We have two parts of the carbon cycle. I said we have what? The terrestrial, and we have what? The aquatic. So we have the terrestrial, then we have the aquatic. We have the aquatic. Terrestrial means the carbon cycle that occurs or happens on what? On land, and the aquatic means the carbon cycle that happens or occurs on what? On in water. Let's say in water. So for terrestrial, we have what? We have cycle on what? On land. On land, and this is what? In water. So the fossil fuels that we're talking about will be in the water. Will be in the water. Then the dead organisms will be on land. Respiration will be on land, but the fossil fuel will be on water. That's why I say we have discovered oil at this part of the sea, or this. All those things are referring to what? The fossil fuels there. And so that's the part. If I ask you the two parts of the carbon cycle, we have the terrestrial carbon cycle and aquatic. Terrestrial means on land. Then aquatic, aqua means what? Water. So aquatic means the carbon cycle that occurs in what? In water. Good. So basically, this is what? This is a few things we need to know about what? About the carbon cycle. Let's continue. Now, movement of carbon cycle between the Earth's sphere. Now, our Earth, as we see, has about four spheres. Four spheres. There are four spheres of the Earth. So let's go into the note and read it. It's a movement of carbon between the Earth spheres. There are four spheres of the Earth. We have the geosphere, which consists of what? Of all rocks on Earth, geosphere. Then we have the hydrosphere, which is made up of what? Of all water. We have the atmosphere. Then we have what? The biosphere. So let's look at those ones too. We are looking at what? The four spheres of the Earth. The Earth we see has four spheres. So spheres of the Earth. Spheres of the Earth will have four. We say we have what? The geosphere, the hydrosphere, the atmosphere, and the biosphere. So let's go. We have one, the geosphere. Then we have the hydrosphere. And the hydrosphere. We have the atmosphere. The atmosphere. Then we have the biosphere. So these are the four spheres, and also so carbon circulate. All I have said is the same thing I'm saying here, just to give you more information. When we say geosphere, when we say hydrosphere, when we say atmosphere, when we say biosphere, what are they? Now, geo simply means what? The Earth. So the rocks of the world, of the Earth, they are those referred to as well as the geosphere. Then the hydrosphere refers to what? Water. Refers to the water. Then the atmosphere, of course, the air. The atmosphere is what? Is the air or the gases. So we say air or what? Or gases that surround the air. Then this is what? This refers to the living things. The living things what? On Earth. So these are the four spheres of the world, of the Earth. We have the geosphere. Let's go. The geosphere. We have the hydrosphere. You say it after me. Let's go. The geosphere, the hydrosphere, the atmosphere. Then we have what? The biosphere. Again, the geosphere, the geosphere, the hydrosphere, the atmosphere, and the what? And the biosphere. So these are the four spheres of what? Of the Earth. Sphere because they look round or they are circular in shape. Okay, let's go. Now, carbon in the geosphere, I'm reading from the note. Let's go directly. Carbon sinks in the geosphere and the hydrosphere through the anthropogenic activities, or through anthropogenic, which is human activities. Let me read again. Carbon sinks into the geosphere, which is the Earth, the rocks, and the hydrosphere, and also into water through the activities of men or human beings. That's what I'm trying to say. That carbon will get into the Earth and the water by human activities. Let's move on. That is carbon emission. So we emit carbon by using cars that run on fuel, and also engines in factories that run on fuel. All these things will emit them. If you visit the Nika man, the guy who grinds your maize or your corn, as that guy is working, if you look outside, he produces this smoke out there. The smoke contains what? Contains carbon. So that's how we human beings contribute to that. Carbon again enters the geosphere through the death of what? The death of what? Of biosphere. When the biosphere, when these guys die, they once again return the carbon into what? Into the earth. So let's take it from there. Carbon again retains or enters the geosphere. Carbon will enter into the earth, into the ground, by the death of what? The death of what? The biosphere. So when living things die, the carbon once again enters for the geosphere. So you are saying that human activities can cause what? Can cause the carbon to enter here. When they say humans also die, they also cause the what? The carbon to enter into the what? The geosphere of the what? Of the earth. Good. Into what? So carbon enters, or carbon again enters the geosphere through the death of biosphere incorporated into what? Into fossils. Carbon moves from the atmosphere into the biosphere. So carbon will move from the atmosphere into the biosphere. We've already discussed that through what? By photosynthesis. By photosynthesis. Okay, see here. So carbon moves from the atmosphere into the biosphere when plants use photosynthesis for the production of food, and animals, when they also feed on the food. So this is basically something I just wanted to know about the spheres and how carbon is also circulating in that. The rocks, carbon will enter the rocks through the rocks and water through our activities. Also, when we die or living things die, carbon also enters what? Enters the rocks. Then the carbon in the atmosphere will also enter into the biosphere, which is the living thing, by photosynthesis. That's when photosynthesis process occurs. Then we feed on the plants, then we get the carbon. Good. So at this stage, we'll end our lesson here. Just brief. When we come the next time, we'll look at the stages involved. I'll go deep into what the photosynthesis, what is in there, the chemical relations and the chemical equations in photosynthesis, how these things are done. Then respiration. It's a very short topic we are treating here. We'll finish this soon. So just sit back, watch this thing, go over and over, and you understand this carbon. It's like very simple science topic. Thank you very much for joining this class. I'm very, very grateful to all of you. Once again, what we say, subscribe to the channel, like the video, share with your friends, and call all of them to come on board, because it's going to be very, very exciting. Thank you very much for joining the class today.